begin. We are ready. Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I am Mario Cimoli, Deputy of ECLAC, Economic Commission for Latin America, Secretariat. And thank very much, UNCTAD, for organizing this panel. I think it's a crucial one. It's important, and it's an important moment for that. And I am very pleased to moderate it. And we have a person really of the very high level and political and sustainable one. We have the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Mukhisa, Kituyi. We have the Minister of Affairs and Trade from Sweden, and Linde. Is coming our ambassador, just from Nigeria, not from Nigeria, but from the other room. And Alberto, Calvo, the Managing Director of E-Commerce Chamber in Argentina. Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to have you, all of you here. And this is an issue. We have a debate in ECLAC also in Latin America too. We are looking what happened with trade, and we have a perception, and we understand that trade is changing structurally, and there is important changes in what is tangible and intangible products in trade. E-commerce and e-trade is becoming really important. Bytes are substituting tangible products, and there is an important change that is not only macroeconomics in part. And there is also an important transformation of production, networking, capabilities, value change, and all of these factors at the micro level are affecting with a trade and are affecting by the new production and new forces in production and organization of production. We said in ECLA that bytes are substituting tangible products. And if you can see how is the movement of byte in the countries exchange is increasing. And here we have an important differences around the world. We have developing countries and middle-income countries that are making an effort, but the effort is not enough, we believe. And we have a sector and region in the region that the European Union that is moving very fast. The United States is moving very fast, and we are very worried, I think, in UNCTAD and ECLAC, that the other part of the world has to be integrated with that. And we have an important impact on this issue, and I think that the person that we have in this panel, all of the personalities are very important to explain that. I think we can organize the floor in the following. And we have 10 minutes to say how we think that is going to affect trade, how we can integrate it in this process developing economy, how we can collaborate between developed and developing one, how we can modify institution, trade agreement, and so on. We know, for example, that there is an important impasse in the negotiation in the WTO and Mercosur and Latin America on e-commerce. There is an impasse. People can understand that it's right or not. Okay, this issue is important. And we have to discuss that, we have to advise government, we have to have a position on that. I think I give 10 minutes, each of you. Later on we have the word to the floor, and I think the beginning is our friend of the other broad institution in United Nations, Mukhisa Kituyi, Secretary of General UNCTAD. Please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Honorable Minister, members of the panel, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I, on behalf of UNCTAD, bid you all welcome to this meeting. I appreciate very much you are turning out. On the last day of a long conference, usually people are very exhausted. When they still have some energy, they are out shopping for the last time. We have to bring back, so we're very happy to have you here. We at UNCTAD feel strongly that there is no gainsaying the critical importance of substantial attention to e-commerce and the digital economy as a major component of international trade today. Not just because of the exponential growth of e-commerce, but also the potential of e-commerce to be an enabler for inclusive prosperity. And that while we see the phenomenal expansion, our own studies have shown how dramatically electronic trading is growing, rising from $1.3 trillion in 2013 to 2.5 in 3 years, growing globally at between 4 and 5% of global GDP, at a time when regular normal trade is only virtually growing at the same rate as GDP. Now, if trade is going to be an enabler for inclusive prosperity, and the main activity is shifting to electronic platforms, absence from electronic visibility means virtually absence from the marketplace. And that becomes a critical matter for developing countries. We in UNCTAD have been championing the call that let different groups go beyond talking to start concrete initiatives that can contribute to identifying challenges, seeking solutions to unlock the potential of electronic commerce, to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, to empower those who are most vulnerable in societies. We have celebrated the notion of the digital economy as being gender neutral, and that in itself becomes a very affirmative phenomenon for bringing along the half that's always left behind in most other activities. One of our more concrete work has to be to call it, often we automatically talk about connectivity as the main challenge. And while it is true that connectivity is important, the basket of other challenges that need to be addressed cannot be left behind. There's up to 6 different challenges ranging from a payment system, legal and regulatory framework, the level of skill development in a country, all the components to create the ecosystem for e-commerce to grow. And similarly, the beyond the border challenges to unlock the potential of e-commerce as an enabler for regional integration. A study we did in April this year with Gigi and Ipsos showed that 60% of the people who are online but don't trade online give the main reason as the deficit of trust. They don't trust enough the payment system, you don't trust enough the confidentiality, apart from cyber crime and unusual identity theft, the notions of commoditizing non-commercial, so-called non-commercial information, all these issues become important if we're going to get the fear out of the way. Those who say in digital trade, we pay, click, and pray. We want them to have a chance of a recourse to solutions that will enable more confidence, that will grow the ecosystem. We are glad that we have started an initiative. I launched 1.5 years ago at UNCTAD 14 in Nairobi, the eTrade for All initiative, which to date has 27 international organizations as members, and more than 30 business entities are members of our business component, the business for eTrade for Development business organization. And we are very much happy that some of those are represented here, and that we have had partners in some member states who have shown a lot of interest and will continue working with us. I would very much like to greatly appreciate members of the panel for joining us in this, if I may take a minute as a host. Mr. Cimoli, thank you very much for joining us. We think ECRAC is an important partner for us. And you are one of the earliest partners of the eTrade for All initiative within the UN family. I'm also pleased to share this panel with Minister Linde. Thank you very much for being a trusted friend. From day one, Sweden has been one of the most important supporters of eTrade for All initiative. And last June, I had the privilege on Midsummer's Day to jointly with you host an important meeting in Stockholm, discussing the importance of understanding the role of digitalization for sustainable development. And together with Finland, Germany, and the United Kingdom, Sweden continues to be one of the most important supporters of our eTrade for All initiative. There's a gentleman who just arrived while we're getting started. My friend, Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, who is very much a Geneva person, but now has taken higher roles elsewhere. The group of Friends of E-Commerce for Development, or the FED, has been an important group interfacing between our e-commerce work and the trade community in Geneva. And Nigeria has played an important role, not to any little measure, because of the work of Ambassador Osakwe, both when he was in Geneva and now in his new position as the head of the National Negotiating Mechanism for International Trade for Nigeria. And we thank you very much for coming to us. Mr. Calvo, thank you very much. The voice of the business community is important if we are going to be able to shape something viable. You are the main deliverers of the promises that we make in our multilateral negotiations. Most important message I want to say, we all appreciate the importance of growing digital marketplace, but we must now find ways of walking the talk with concrete steps to scale up. How much activity enhances inclusiveness, and how much will impact the policy of developing countries, particularly LDCs, to show the priority that this area deserves. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and sorry for taking the floor a bit long.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to propose the initiative, really important. I think you said inclusiveness, electronic platform, trust, and social organization and business one. Important elements, crucial ones. And I want to give the floor to the Minister of UAR Affairs and Trade of Sweden, and Linde. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I would like to start thanking you, Secretary General Kituyi. And as you said, today is a very special day in Sweden because it's the Lucia celebration, and we meet. And last time we met was on even more important celebration, the Midsummer Day, and we met. So it must mean something that I spent two of the most important celebrations together with you. But I'm very happy to be able to take part in this side event on leverage on the e-commerce for all its vehicle for sustainable development to ensure that everyone can benefit from the digital economy. I see this occasion as a timely follow-up to the discussion Secretary Kituyi and I had on the topic in the seminar in Stockholm. Global development of the digital economy is advancing at an astonishing pace, and it's transforming our societies and economies in many different ways. I'm convinced that this digital transformation can offer great opportunities for growth, jobs, and sustainable development around the world. My optimism stems to a large degree from the Swedish experience in developing and taking advantage of the new digital technologies. Key factors for this has been ICT access for all, deregulation, well-functioning internal markets, and using digital solutions for an efficient public sector, but also offering adjustment support and educational programs for those who lose their jobs. In addition, Sweden is open to global trade and investments which promote digital transformation and expansion for global value chains. Some of our experiences are also relevant to developing countries, but learning goes both ways. The digital revolution is making it possible for developing countries to leapfrog several traditional development stages, for example, through e-payment systems. There is definitely a very clear economic case for e-commerce, including in development countries. In Africa, for example, it is expected by 2018 the e-commerce market will soar to US dollars 50 billions, an increase about 500% compared with 2013, when the level was $8 billion. At the same time, there is a particular need to tackle the current digital divide affecting the developing countries. This divide concerns many aspects, ranging from a lack of infrastructure to capacity constraints, particularly in the least developed countries, the LDCs. As UNCTAD pointed out, it is in Information and Economy report in 2017, developing countries are taking important steps to integrate into the digital economy. One example is the mobile phone penetration. Today, 90% of the population in developing countries have access to mobile phone, but only 40% have access to mobile broadband and less than 10% to fixed broadband. There are considerable variations among development countries. LDC scores the lowest, with fewer than 3% of LDC population ever having made a purchase online. But the digital divide runs not only between countries, but also within them, between urban and rural areas, between different socioeconomic groups, and between men and women. Since I represent the first ever feminist government, I will return to this crucial gender dimension. Development cooperation can support and serve as a catalyst in combating these different aspects and in raising the capacity of developing countries to benefit from the rapidly evolving digital economy. This aim is the core of the Swedish Development Cooperation. The strategy of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, called SIDA, for economically sustainable development promotes improved access to open and secure ICT and greater capacity for innovation. The promotion of access to ICT is integrated into all of SIDA's programs. Swedish support is also given to specific programs with an ICT focus, such as the World Bank Multi-Donor Trust Fund, their Digital Entrepreneurship Program, and another example is United Nations Foundation's Digital Impact Alliance, with its vision to realize a more inclusive digital economy. One challenge is securing the necessary data to measure e-commerce, which is necessary for policy formulation and implementation. This is why Sweden has supported UNCTAD's efforts to improve the availability and quality of ICT data. One important result has been UNCTAD's Business to Consumers e-commerce index, which provides a valuable picture of e-commerce readiness in over 140 economies. As I mentioned, LDC faces specific challenges in participating effectively on e-commerce. Only 1 in 8 people in LDCs are online, and challenges such as infrastructure and e-commerce skills are especially prevalent in LDCs. Sweden places great importance on supporting LDCs to participate in international trade and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Support has been given to various areas, as the recent contribution of approximately $60,000 US to the WTO LDC Trust for participation in the 11th WTO Ministerial Conference, this conference. And another example is the donation of approximately $120,000 to an UNCTAD project to optimize market access for LDC services, discussed at another symposium at this conference. UNCTAD's eTrade Ready project addresses LDC issues in the digital field, which is also the subject for another session in this symposium. Sweden has contributed finances for e-commerce readiness assessment in Burma, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos. As I mentioned earlier, bridging the gender gap in the digital economy is another important issue. There are about 250 million fewer women than men online. In LDCs, 31% fewer women than men have access to the internet. Investment in gender equality yields the biggest return of all development investment and is therefore smart economics for both business and society. We must address the fact that women and men face different obstacles by mainstreaming a gender perspective to all stages of development projects. This is also why gender equality aspects are taken into account in all Swedish development cooperation, including when it comes to digitalization and trade. Examples of specific Swedish-supported programs include UNCTAD's project on ICT and women's entrepreneurship, and the World Wide Web's Foundation project focusing specifically on women. My government has also supported UNCTAD's recent launch of the Trade and Gender Toolbox, which I and Secretary Ellen Kituyi was presenting in Geneva this summer. And that is assessing how trade policies affect men and women differently and is essential in order to design policies that favor women's empowerment. To enhance the effectiveness and reach of dialogue and development cooperation regarding e-commerce, we need the active involvement and cooperation of all stakeholders, including international organizations, national government, civil society, and private business. UNCTAD's eTrade for All initiative, supported by Sweden, can contribute to this goal. The Business for eTrade development platform, partnering in part with the International Council of Swedish Industry, promotes private sector engagement. UNCTAD's e-commerce week and the intergovernment group of experts in e-commerce are important venues for multi-stakeholder dialogue. Inclusive and multilateral e-commerce rules are an important complement to dialogue and development cooperation. Despite the great opportunities offered by e-commerce globally, WTO rules are lagging behind. Over the lifespan of WTO work program on electronic commerce, which was established already in 1998, internet usage in the world grew less from 1% to 40% by 2014. My government is a strong supporter of the multilateral system and believes the WTO must adapt to this new reality. It must provide an updated legal framework on e-commerce, including the participation of all member states, since we are all, regardless of our stage of development, affected by the digital transformation. In view of this, I regret the lack of progress on e-commerce at this ministerial conference. The digital transformation, with its far-reaching effects, however, will not stop. We must therefore bring forward text-based discussion in the WTO as soon as possible after this MC11. Such a negotiation process, combined with enhanced international dialogue and development cooperation on e-commerce, will contribute to improving developing countries' ability to participate fully in the digital economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think that would conclude with a very, not progress about e-commerce is a point. It's very important. And the last agreement was, how many? 20 years ago, something like that. Everything has changed after that. And it seems to be the debate when production, social civility arrived at, we are very, very late. This is the point. I agree completely on that. And I think it's a point to have a debate how we can move the frontier on that. Nathan, we have the new, another intervention. Is the Chief Trade Negotiator of Nigeria, Osakwe. You have the floor, my friend.
Thank you, Mario. I like very much the way that Secretary General Kituyi started off. And if I heard him correctly, my memory is not as good as it used to be, but if I heard him correctly, he said something like absence from the digital economy would be tantamount to absence from trade and the market economy, is what I recall was how he started out. And if you ask me what would be the quotable quote of this panel, I think this should be the quotable quote of the panel, and frankly, the quotable quote of the 11 WTO Ministerial Conference. And I just heard him say it. Now, the other thing that I would link it to is what Minister Linde has just said, that WTO rules are lagging behind, and you're absolutely right. But I have news for you, and the news I have for you is that at 8:30 this morning, 70 WTO members, and Cecilia Malmström represented the European Union this morning in an initiative led by Australia, Japan, and Singapore, including Nigeria as well, launched an e-commerce work program as a group of countries. And we have just launched it. 70 countries, 70 WTO members, as I said, and we will be meeting very early in 2018, and thereupon giving our reports to the General Council. And if you look at the one-page statement, joint statement that we adopted this morning, what is agreed is that we are launching a WTO work program that would also develop a multilateral framework on electronic commerce. So all is not lost. In fact, there are gains being made and progress being made here in Buenos Aires, not multilaterally in the ideal typical sense of multilateralism, but by a coalition of like-minded countries that are moving ahead and do want to be in lockstep with the reality of the digital economy. Third point I would like to make is to veer back to Secretary General Kituy's UNCTAD and to pay him tribute for the powerful steps that he has taken. And you, Minister Linde, you have mentioned it on e-commerce initiative for all and UNCTAD e-commerce week, which has gone a huge amount of way to begin to educate people. Now in the time I have left, to the topic. And the question, as I understand it, is how can electronic commerce be leveraged as a vehicle for sustainable development? I want to think about it with you in the next 7 minutes or so at three dimensions. One is, how would you deal with it at a national level? And there's a huge variety of national dimensions. Question number 2 would be, what are the challenges to be addressed very specifically in making sure that the gains are maximized? And thirdly, what should the WTO be looking at when the group of 70, as of today, begins work early in 2018? Take Nigeria, for example, on question number 1. The biggest challenge is the business environment. It's a hard, I'm Nigerian, it's a hard business environment for firms. And you really cannot speak about any sort of development, including its sustainable variant, if you don't have a context in which businesses are enabled to perform. And so if you introduce digital platforms to begin to deal with the restrictions and the rigidities in the economy, putting the crooks and the Shylocks and the hustlers out of business, removing the licensing procedures that provide a handle for corruption, improving governance, achieving efficiency gains in terms of expedited processes for import and export, grant of visas, one government, single windows. If you don't do this, you haven't made a start. And this is one area where the use of digital platforms would be able to radically, robustly advance a positive development agenda. And so you have to use it to deal with corruption, to improve governance, improve efficiency. And I like the points that you raised, Minister Linde, begin to, and Secretary General Kituyi as well, bringing those that were not properly integrated into the national economy. And you spoke about women correctly, and I would add to that the informal sector, and I would add to that micro, small, and medium enterprises, and you give them a platform, and they are able to trade more efficiently domestically across borders. So this is one way, one dimension in which to do this at the national level. And speaking a bit more specifically about micro, small, and medium enterprises, over 70% of the GDP of Nigeria is accounted for by SMEs, small, medium, and micro enterprises. Close to 75% of the economy is informal, simply driven underground by previous policies that were unsound. The more you do things that are unsound, the more you have unsound policies, the more you drive them underground. And so the digital economy, and this is what we're doing, there's a Smart Nigeria digital economy project that we're pursuing. We're using it for an enabling environment for business. We're using it to provide a platform for micro, small, and medium enterprises. We did sign up, by the way, to the Canadian ITC initiative, and UNCTAD, I believe, as well, on empowerment of women. And so if we begin to do the right things, the results will show. And Nigeria is a good example. Just in the November rankings of the World Bank Ease of Doing Business, progress has been registered by the Nigerians. Even though President Buhari had estimated when he launched his initiative on I've taken it right down to the wire, but I really should keep within time. And thanks for the opportunity to make this contribution. 5 seconds. I donate it as credit to the next speaker.
Thanks very much. I think, thanks very much for intervention. I think there is a point, honestly, you put, probably not so rough, but was putting on the table. Digital economy is not neutral. It's not neutral because market has a structure, because there is network hierarchies, because I think access of the small and medium firms from developing countries. When you have this diffused digital economy with a very strong control by 10 firms, 20 firms, you know, market is not neutral in that sense, and there is hierarchy, network, difficulties, and when we put on debate on the table, people that are negotiating in multilateral aspect, the people know that. Don't say that, but know that. And that's the reason we have the private sector for the region. They have to explain us why this point. Go ahead. Thanks, my friend.
The spot now.
Alberto Calvo is the president of e-commerce in Argentina. Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Cimoli. Good morning to everyone. I see that kind of the energy is directly proportional to being the third day here of meetings. But I hope that you are enjoying your stay in Buenos Aires as being a host here. I'm here today to give some perspective from the business sector, as Mario said, about the opportunities and challenges in the development of digital economy. We need to understand that we are still in the early days of digital economy. Whatever we do now will impact positively or negatively what will come in the very near future. This is a in a very dynamic motion. Changes and innovation is happening every day, and the opportunities as well. Certainly, digital economy is a big opportunity for economies and trade to develop faster, as it connects small businesses to a larger markets. Obviously, still also is a big challenge, as not everyone is really prepared for that. We need to understand digital economy as probably the most democratic economic activity, because it gives access to a limitless amount of product and services to people, markets, and consumers, regardless where they are, and to all of them in the same conditions and with transparency. In terms of the challenges, I don't think every individual country, region is prepared in the same way, and we need to address that. According to UNCTAD, almost 45% of the business done considering B2B and B2C is concentrated in only 3 countries. And that is a big kind of lack of balance that we need to address. But what are the key aspects or factors that influence or affect the development of digital economy? There's a lot of theory about this, but I try to summarize and group them in 4 buckets. Talent and development of skills, that is a key one. Just think that the education system needs to change faster. We have all been educated to put a lot of information in our brains, and now the information, it's in our pockets here. So that's a big change in the paradigm. Also, digital economy will demand new skills. That means new jobs. On the other side, means some jobs will have to transform into something else. And then, big call out here for the public sector. We are, as you mentioned, we are the first generation of people living in this digital economy. So it's difficult to be in the game and rule in the game at the same time. So the public sector needs to catch up fastly in order to understand what are the needs of digital economy and what is needed to further develop that. In terms of technology, I think that is the one that is moving faster. So no words on that. In terms of policies, we need as Mr. Ambassador said, a very strong agenda in order to, not to regulate, but to facilitate trade internally in the countries and also cross-border. And that considers all the legal, tax, customs aspects. And then in terms of infrastructure, there's a lot of work to do. Just think that broadband access that we always mention, there are countries that have 70% participation. Some countries have only 2 to 3% penetration of broadband access. So if we don't address that, I mean, the uneven balance that we have in the global trade, eTrade, is going to continue. The logistics also need to put themselves at the same pace, because the tsunami of parcels that we will see flowing around the world will be huge immediately. And also payment methods. Access to payment methods in some countries is really low, and most of them are not compatible from one country to the other. So we need to have a common system where we can put with trust, it was mentioned here, our money without any problem. But what is important about all this, and probably the last call out, is about understanding the speed on how this system moves. And the speed of this development is determined by the bucket, the one of these four buckets that moves at the slowest pace. So we need not only a holistic but an interdisciplinary approach in order to attack all these, in order to move them at the same pace of development, fast. And why do I point out that the speed of development here? I think it's critical, and this should bring a sense of urgency to get global support to ensure that all countries benefit from digital economy. On the other side, if that does not happen, the gap that I mentioned between developed countries and the rest is going to get bigger and bigger, and that concentration is not going to be healthy for the globe. Last, kind of going to Mr. Ambassador also words, I think I look really with joy that 70 countries have agreed on putting together an agenda on this. I haven't heard a lot of agreements coming out of this meeting, and that is good news. And also the fact that they will be meeting in early next year goes back to my point of that sense of urgency that we need in order to keep this moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I think we have different points. It's very important. Difficulties, jobs that country have to do, negotiations. When I would like to give the words to the floor to have some question and to have another round. Please be heard. You have a very exclusive people here. This is in Argentina. You can say more or less whatever, everything you want to say. Don't worry. We can make music, dramatics, and everything like that. Don't worry. Go ahead. Make a question. Please, come. Thank
you very much.
Yes. If you can see the name of where you come from, that's good. Yes. And the other can be preparing on that.
Hello? No, it doesn't work. Yes?
That's happened. This is the panel on e-commerce, platform, digital, and so on.
This is the moment when we dance and sing.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Bravo.
Thank you very much. I thought it was me, but in fact not. So that makes me feel better. My name is Maria Rosaria Ceccarelli, and I work in the UNEC. And I'm very proud to be part of the eTrade family and of to be here with you. Actually, UNEC and through UNCFAC, that is the Center for Trade Facilitation and Electronic Business, is the kind of concrete part of the UM family, because what we do, we are the focal point for recommendation and standard on trade facilitation and e-business. And actually, when Ambassador Osakwe was talking about online signature, digital payment, e-certificate, single window, this is what all we do. So now I feel very kind of useful to be this piece in the family. And actually we have a vice chair in CFAC from Nigeria and one from Sweden, so it would be great also to have one from Latin America, so we can close the circle. What I wanted to ask is, do you think the 70 countries that are now pushing this e-trade, they will manage to have a collective global initiative, or do you think a regional initiative are still important to push? For example, in ESCAP there is a framework for paperless trade. well, in the regional commission, we cover, the 5 of us, we cover the whole world. So would it be any use that the same initiatives that has been taken in ESCAP is also kind of pushed by the other regional commission, the other UN regional commission, or not?
Thank you very much. Bravi. Go ahead. Could you see the name, where you came from?
Thank you very much. Kimberly Bottright from the World Economic Forum. We're also partners of the eTrade for All initiative. It's a great delight to be partnering with you on that. At the World Economic Forum, we often talk a lot about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is tremendously exciting, but it's also, in many respects, terrifying too, because it's moving so rapidly, which calls for this particular type of exchange. It calls for exchange on how to get the rules of the road right, about the types of capacity building that's needed, because if we don't, we will end up with a massive digital chasm that will mean that we will not achieve the SDGs. That is just every data point that we look at indicates that. Moreover, speaking of data, we need more of it. So again, congratulations to UNCTAD and the WTO, OECD, and others who are doing great efforts on getting that data to give us a clearer sense of where we're going. So with all that in mind, also just to say that we're working hopefully with UNCTAD next year a little bit more on regional dialogue, specifically to build up a sense of get a really dynamic and exciting conversation going in certain regions on to help countries understand how they can get the rules of the road right for them in a local context. Which leads me to my specific question, which is potentially specifically for Ambassador Osakwe, but to anyone else on the panel too. Congratulations very much on this joint statement that will shortly be released by the 70 countries. How can we get more LDCs engaged? Because I know there's not so many, and what's the strategy that you have there? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm Nick Ashton-Hart. I'm often working with the private sector, but sometimes also with UNCTAD. Firstly, Ambassador Osakwe, congratulations. The project that began with the feds in Nairobi on UNCTAD 14 has really, I think, made a pivotal difference in creating the political will for the 70 countries today. I don't think we would be where we are without the leadership of you and Alvaro of Costa Rica and Alex Mora and Takia Shah and the rest. So I hope you all are going to have a party somewhere. And I, for one, would like to at least drink some water with you at the party, and if not, see some pictures. As you embark on this, I certainly immediately, I looked at the list and immediately said, we need more LDCs and we need more landlocked developing countries, so that the digital divide question and the trade, what trade can do to help reduce the digital divide can be looked at. But I also immediately thought, how can the international institutions and the regional institutions provide the decision support materials that are going to be needed for countries to evaluate how their national priorities relate to the language of e-commerce? How do payment systems relate to financial inclusion using mobile devices, the digital divide and all of this? And do you think that the feds or a group of countries could provide some indication to the institutions of here's the kind of information that the members are going to need beyond what is available today in order to support this process as it goes forward?
Thank you very much. There is, please, another one.
Thank you. My name is Pierre Gröning from the Foreign Trade Association, representing 2,000 retailers, import companies, supermarket chains, with a combined turnover of $1.6 trillion, so rather substantial amount of companies coming together in my association. And so like what they have in common is that they're all interested in importing, exporting, and of course e-commerce is very much at the heart of their business activities. And when you ask them about the obstacles, I think they come up with mostly 3 answers, and I think 2 of them at least have been also addressed here. The first being evidently that there's still a lot of regulatory barriers when it comes to exporting beyond the national border. Even within the EU, that's still a big issue, and internationally as well, obviously. Then obviously there's a lot of issues about infrastructure that also was mentioned, but I think the most important concern they mentioned is that e-commerce is a low or non-profit environment. there's hardly any company, at least in the retail space, that earns money by selling online. Of course, there are many exceptions, but say the general rule is that companies use online websites as a window to attract people to come to their stores. It's a very challenging situation for them, and if you see the largest e-commerce company in the world has not gained like a single penny in the last 10 years altogether. Might change soon, but so it's showing that it's a very difficult environment, and in this sense, I wanted to ask, like, how are you addressing this through also this project that you're kicking off, and also how is this being addressed through, I say indirectly, through the declaration that has been made this morning and has already gathered 70 member states. One issue here being, of course, that there might be public social resistance to any change, as we see today that trade policy is very much under fire globally. And so I was wondering, like, is this something also that you look at just to make sure that you gain people also to understand that, well, this is the future and there might be some obstacles, but we have to accept that future and therefore take people on board in this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for answers. I think the issue of regional is coming from more or less in all the questions. The urgency that we have on industrial revolution, new industrial revolution, is another issue. And I think we want to give the floor to all of you, but I want to make a question. Don't believe that, it's my question, e-commerce is not neutral. Eh? Behind e-commerce in Europe, you have a digital market that has an enormous scale. You have rules, you have industrial policy, you have technological policy. If you want to have the same position in developing countries, you need to have something like that. That is a scale, industrial policy, technological policy, issues like that. When you're thinking about that, my worry, like ECLAC, is don't believe that people is only resistant to change. Please, if I put the small and medium firm from Italy, north of Italy, to have e-commerce, it's going to be, the stock, very efficient. If you take the medium, small and medium firms in Latin America, it's not to be the same. I think this happened the same in Nigeria. Behind e-commerce, there is production, technology, policy. It's not only resistant to change. But I need these people, is going to be all of the answer to you, and I have my colleagues the first.
All right, thank you very much. Voice to the success of the effort of Ambassador Osakwe and others. I know that when you've been hunting for a buffalo and you don't get one, you come out with an antelope, you must celebrate the antelope. And Buenos Aires has had very little to celebrate this time, so I think it will be carried as evidence of the multilateral system working, at least partially. But I also want to mention that trade-related rule making on ICT is going to be very important for the digital marketplace. And it's one of the things that will help to add momentum to looking at the development angle, particularly in the most vulnerable countries and regions on e-commerce. But having said that, we should also say that there are components that are not totally dependent on multilaterally negotiated rules to move on. I think as a development enabler, questions on coherence between the digital market possibilities and the educational system, investing in the right skills, investing even in mobile connectivity, the broadband, payment system, integrity of transactions with the possibility of a web-based dispute resolution mechanisms. An example which has been led by Mexico, that you can electronically dispute a transaction and get results quickly. It adds to the credibility of the system. Some of these things do not need multilateral rules before they go into force. So what we have to do is a dual exercise. We must continue the momentum of creating a rules-based international system that appreciates the importance of e-commerce as an emerging area. But we must also continue with areas of concrete developmental activity, encouraging particular countries which are mixing up things. And I saw this in discussions with the LDCC yesterday and the day before. There's some countries which are thinking that reluctance to negotiate multilaterally the rules of e-commerce in the WTO is the same as reluctance to discuss e-commerce as a development tool at home. But some of this is partly because in many developing countries, the ministry in charge of electronic commerce infrastructure is different from the Ministry of Trade. And they kind of operate in silos. And sometimes that carries over an inadequate appreciation of the phenomenal capacity of e-commerce to be an enabler for trade and inclusion. So I was thinking that we have to sustain these two narratives as both routes going in the same direction. But I think the specific question about some of the developing countries like LDCs, we have to address how do we make the politicians see the critical importance of priority in policy on electronic commerce. This is one of the challenges. I was listening to Jack Ma yesterday saying what we need to do is force politicians to see that they have to facilitate, and when they're getting the benefits, then they can also start strengthening their ability to regulate. But that's a conversation that we have to carry on.
Thank you very much.
I would like to speak a little bit about what the gentlemen in the blue shirt were talking about, and how the digitalization is fundamentally affecting the way that we trade, because it allows, in a way, both individuals but also companies to plug directly into the world trade. With no hands in between, they just can plug in themselves into the world trade. And it opens up a lot of possibilities for the LDC, but it also have a lot of challenges that we have to overcome. Before, some of the countries, and not the least women in those countries, were totally marginalized from the world trade, and now they could be inside the world trade immediately. And that is, of course, something that has to do with the digital divide, and sees that we have to overcome the digital divide. And also, what I don't remember your name in the blue shirt, but what would you? Yeah. But what you talked about how this is not an isolated issue, and this is not. We have to see it in connection with Agenda 2030, for example, and how we can get a holistic manner to incorporate this e-commerce and the digital issues to achieve the 2030 agenda. And there are many examples. For example, the empowerment of women and entrepreneurs. And there is one, maybe Secretary General Kituyi could take this example that you often use on how payments directly to women in, I think was it Kenya? Yeah, made a lot of development to families and societies, because when it has gone via the men in the traditional way, they used it not so much for family and so this is a way using the digitalization and the e-commerce also for achieving a better situation for families and society in the LDCs. You can also have decent job creation via the e-commerce entrepreneurship, and the increase of export is one of the goals. The LDC's share of the export should be doubling to 2020 as one of the goals of the Agenda 2030. And I think that e-commerce is the key to reach this goal. So there are so many things that is not only for individuals and so on, but actually the common goals that we have set together as states and as governments that we need to do, but only in connection with stakeholders. We cannot do it only by governments. I also like to say that what you said about this need of the infrastructure, the tsunami of parcels and so on, that is something that has not been at all thought to the end of it, because this is now coming and we can see so many problems with it, and that has to be organized, and that is something that companies, state-owned agencies and companies need to do together, because I think that is not only going to be solved by the market. Here has to be a combination of market and state cooperation. Thank you.
And we give the floor to our friends, Ambassador, please.
Thank you. Madam, in answer your question, as I understood it, was what's the relationship in terms of what goes on the digital economy at the national, the regional, and the multilateral level in terms of your own work at the UNECE? How I would respond to that, actually, again, is to borrow what Secretary General Kituyi has just said. And if I heard him correctly, it was something like this. Trade-related rule-making in the digital economy would be very important, but that does not preclude what needs to happen at a corporate and private sector level nationally. And I think really this would be the way to approach the question that you have raised. If you play back my presentation on Nigeria, every economy has to determine where the greatest potential for reforms lie. For Nigeria, it's the business environment. And when you determine what the issue is, then you take the platform of the digital economy and you apply it there. And so what's going on in Nigeria? I mean, e-commerce is booming very, very robustly, simply because people, the consumers in Nigeria were simply sick and tired of energy difficulties, post offices not working, trade logistics at a very low level of inefficiency. And so the digital economy and e-commerce is being very strongly powered by the younger generation in Nigeria. And government is only playing catch up. And so they're writing softwares that circumvent the structural rigidities of the economy. And I think this is Mr. Kituyi's axiom, I would say, response to your question. It has to be tailored, because even for electronic and digital platforms, one size will not fit all. And that would be an answer to that. And I know that the UNECE is doing very good work. With regard to the question from the World Economic Forum, coherence would be absolutely indispensable between and amongst multilateral institutions if this is to work. This is an agenda that the WTO must not hog to itself, just as there was a global alliance for trade facilitation that was driven by WEF and several others. I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago in this building that I made a proposal for a global alliance on investment facilitation. Now I'm taking it one step further, and I'm going to propose a global alliance on e-commerce and the digital economy. It's got to be an alliance, otherwise it's not going to work. What you have is an area of massive potential opportunity that is degraded or would be reduced in effectiveness simply because multilateral institutions are in conflict with each other again, and it should not be. UNCTAD is leading in terms of outreach, capacity building, and here, Nick, I'm coming to you. And I think that the absolutely sterling work that UNCTAD and Mr. Kituyi are leading, principally in Geneva, I think they should now be given resources to take it to the regions. Mr. Kituyi was in Abuja on the 2nd of November to help us, Nigeria, drive the investment facilitation agenda. And so I think that the answer to all this would be to create global alliances. And there WEF has a huge convening power. UNCTAD has it, and then the WTO will do what it does best, and it's what the WTO does is actually very narrow. It's very, very narrow. It's very focalized, and that is in the area of rulemaking. And to conclude, Nick, I don't think you should be thanking me. I should be paying you tribute for approaching me in Nairobi and saying, listen, Nigerian, why don't you get your country moving on e-commerce and the digital economy? He was actually the one who put me onto this agenda.
Thank you. Alberto.
Okay, let me tap on the issue about profitability or lack of profitability being a speed bump for development. And I'll give you actual examples. Most companies are still struggling with profitability, you were right, but we are still in this trial and error mode of trying to find the best business model that can ensure that long-term profitability. So far, funding has not been an issue in general. So kind of looking forward long-term, we should see the light there. But going back to the example, I think that mostly for trade that is delivers physical product, there's a lot of investment needed. In the company that I rule here in Argentina, I mean, it has business in Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. And we had to set up 3 big facilities with a huge millionaire investment in order to have a distribution center with all the technologies and facilities just to deliver product in the countries. So when you analyze the business model, I mean, economies of scale are critical in order to get to that point of profitability. That's why having a very high speed of growth, it's critical, and most companies struggle there. And why not trying to gain more scale with cross-border trade, which is not happening? And I'll give you an example. We have a big facility here outside Buenos Aires, and for us, it's easier to deliver a product to Montevideo in Uruguay, across the river that is right here, than to Patagonia. But I can't, due to regulations in order to ship product there, import, or export back. So we are not getting the benefit of cross-border, and we are in some way punishing the Uruguayan consumer as they are not getting access to a lot of products in their market. So if we find a way that we can set a group of rules to facilitate that cross-border exchange, will be critical. And I'm talking about facilitation. Just think that only in Latin America, at least 3% of total retail business is done through e-commerce. Only 3%. Do we really need a big set of regulations for that? Let it grow. Probably when it gets bigger, we will need a different frame in order to regulate it. But so far, I mean, let it grow.
Okay, thank you very much. Our friend ambassador have to leave, I think, but we have question for one question more. If you want to stay, could be very important contribution. Our friend.
All be leaving now.
Yes, all be leaving now. We close now. Okay. No. Thanks very much. It was a pleasure. At the next time, and thank very much for UNCTAD to organizing it. You have to say some words?
Yes, sir. So thank you very much. First of all, can we please put our together for Thank you very much for creating time in this your tight schedules to be with us here. May I thank our audience for participating well, and also my team led by Shamika and Torbjörn. Thank you very much for putting this together, and we look forward to deepening from action to results as our mantra in the coming period. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.